What's going on, everybody, and welcome to the Other Side of the Firewall podcast, where we talk about the latest and greatest of cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breakers, those people of color who've made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. My name is Ryan Williams, and as always, I'm joined by Shannon Tynes.
What's up? What's up?
What's going on? So definitely continue to tune into the podcast. Check out our Monday episode, which talked about Baltimore schools receiving a cyber attack and how it cost $10 million. Then on Tuesday, we talk about cyber crime groups offering six-figure salaries for talent, top-tier talent, and how crazy that is, and how they're better at recruiting than legal companies in some regards. Definitely check that episode out. And then on Friday, so in the future, definitely tune in for that episode of the Weekly Rundown, where we talk about everything books, movies, games, things of that nature, just everything outside of cyber, kind of like what we do to unwind. So check that out. With all that being said, today's episode is our discussion. So on Wednesdays, we do a discussion. This one comes from an article written at shrm.com or .org, I'm sorry. And the title of the article is DE&I in 2023. Experts forecast layoffs, remote work, and more. So I think we talked about it last week, kind of in passing, about how because of these kind of turbulent times, right? We're coming out of the pandemic. We are potentially running into a recession. It's still, we'll see if that happens or not, but companies are tightening the purse strings. They're laying people off. They're doing hiring freezes. And how it seems to be, at least right now, the stats coming back saying that it could be disproportionately impactful to women and minorities. So in this article, it talks about back in March 2020, when the pandemic caused nationwide lockdowns, Black, Asian Americans, and Latino workers lost their jobs at higher rates than white employees. And we talk about DE&I a lot on the podcast. That's kind of the basis of why the podcast exists, right? Like we didn't see a lot of people like us within cybersecurity. The stats showed that it was only like 7%. Now it's 9%. And then there weren't a lot of women, people of color. Like there wasn't a lot of diversity of culture, which we believe brings in a diverse mindset and the way we think. This article talks about how it brings innovation to your company, and how in 2023, if you want to remain relevant and be impactful, you should probably work on your DE&I as opposed to cutting those people as the layoffs and the workers continue to be shed from these companies, because we don't want another 2020 situation. So a very good article. It talks mostly about how to overcome these hurdles, like as opposed to going back into that 2020 mindset. Instead, you should be looking for bias within your workplace to make sure you don't have any systemic issues that could potentially cost you money in the long run, right? You lose that innovation, you lose that diversity of thought. When everyone has the same background, the same mindset, like sometimes that can cause you to be stuck in your ways, and then that doesn't allow for growth and continued progression within the workplace. So how do you feel about this, Shannon?
So here's the thing. I understand it. And here's why, right? So the part you mentioned about how it mentioned coming in March 2020 about all different minority groups that were laid off. When it came to COVID, that's for me, it was because it was the service industry that took a hit, right? You have a lot of Black, Asian American, Latinos working in the service industry, right? So that's why that happened. In other ways, right? So we have to think about this. So with DE&I, right? DE&I got really heavy the last couple years, right? Like if I was to put an inflection point on it, it would probably be George Floyd, right? I know this is not a social podcast. I'm not trying to get into that, but from what happened with George Floyd, from that point forward, DE&I was one of those things that came up heavy when it came to hiring in the United States, at least, right? I'll say that. Now, the reason I think they see, and they don't mention this in the article, but the reason I think they see it being harder on the minorities is because DE&I is recently being taken serious. Those are usually the last people to get hired on, right? So when you go to these companies and they start firing people, what happens? Last one in has to be the first one to go, right?
Right.
When you started making those efforts, right, to be more diverse, more equitable, more integrated with different races and sexes, right? they're usually the last ones hired on, right? Like they're new within the last 2 years. So you cut from the bottom, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like it's a good thing that these companies did this. And I know there are companies that are out there doing it, right? I've talked to people that are job hunting to where they're like, man, I had this interview with so-and-so. 6 of the questions were DE&I, and it kind of threw them off, right? They were like, I don't know how that helps for what you're looking for in their mind, right? Like you're not gonna say this out loud, but they're like, I don't know how that helps with what you're looking for, but it is something that some of these businesses really are taking seriously. But like I said, it is a double-edged sword, right? Because that's just how the companies do is they're going to cut from the bottom, last one in, first one out. And that's sad, right? I don't run a big business myself, so I can't say I know a more equitable way to do it. You know what I mean? To say, oh, well, I'm not, because it's kind of I, I don't want to come off like this either. I mean, it's kind of unfair not to cut them, right? Just based off DE&I, right? And I realize the point of the podcast, right? We're here to help that. I get it. I'm not trying to be counterintuitive, but um, there are things to look at that I just wouldn't know from that perspective, from their perspective. But as much as I want DE&I to be more integrated, I can see where the article is coming off, and I could see why it would happen. Right now, what change needs to be made to where that's not the case? I don't know. I can't tell you what that is.
Right.
You know,
Maybe so the hope is that it's just a reshuffling, right? Like as opposed to cutting these people when they never get back into the workplaces. It's supposed to be, or at least from my non-CEO perspective, right? They're cutting in order to protect the bottom line, but companies that are in their growth state or that are not impacted, like they're not tech companies or they're not pure tech companies, pure cybersecurity companies. These people are hopefully going to make it to companies that have arms or workplaces that have these things within them. Like take for example, like a construction company. They might also have a tech department, right? So these people may be shed by a pure tech company, but then now they can find work within like construction's not going anywhere. And if anything, they're building more than they've built before. So that would be a protected industry, and that it also needs this talent. So maybe like, this is my optimism trying to show, right? Like maybe these people will just be reshuffled because they've already worked for a company, they've already shown that they have talent, and then I can take these skills somewhere else. Is the hope that they just don't drop off and then have to find employment elsewhere, right?
so
Doing something totally different.
here's my thinking on that, to play devil's advocate to that,
Mhm.
right? If they were cut from a bigger company, it's because the bigger company was not getting those smaller companies coming to them to provide those services, right? So if that's the case, where the bigger companies were like, nah, we're not gonna have anybody do it for us, let alone hire anybody else. They're just kind of out there in the wind. If that makes sense, if
Right.
I'm not explaining that correctly. Like I don't know, man. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but I don't have the answers to this. I wish I had a better answer on why
Right.
it would not affect DE&I. You know what I mean? Because we know the talent is out there, but once they start cutting from the bottom, like they're not gonna hire for a little while. And they're just gonna keep the people on that are there, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
even when it does come, even when it does come time for them to hire, I mean, this is sad to say, I think DE&I is gonna fall by the wayside. Is my thinking behind it, right? They're just gonna be like, okay, now we gotta ramp up real quick, but we don't want to go through, and it's kind of like the Rooney Rule in the NFL, right? Like it got to a point where they were just interviewing a black candidate to say that they did it. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And they weren't really giving
But
them.
so in that regard, then perhaps because I don't know, like it's just a weird time. Like so the recession could be potentially coming on. They're cutting, like you said, from the people who came in last. They'll be the first to let go. But they still have like years of these pipelines they built, right? Like so, like you have your Microsofts, your Apples, your Bell Souths, like they're building up on campuses, pulling in this talent from HBCUs and the like that are still on their way to being funneled into these companies. So hopefully it all kind of comes together. I would say, like in the next year or two, like we see this talent coming into the marketplace as well as the economy has kind of corrected itself, so to speak, because we might even go into recession. Like this is just them protecting themselves in case it does hit. But who's to say it actually ever does, right? Like, hopefully it doesn't get drawn out. Like, I don't want years of this. Like, everything's gone. Like, go to the dollar store, it should be $2 store, right? Because everything, all the prices have ballooned. Like, a tank of gas is like, I don't even know what tank gas costs anymore. Like, every day it's different. Somewhere around 350, I think. But like the hope is that like we get through this and then they can start picking these people back up. But I don't think they'll pick them up in mass, like you're saying though, like because we've already cut them, we've survived without them. But I hope for the shuffle. Like I hope that they find work in medium to smaller size companies, or if bigger companies do start to hire again, like you remember so and so, like who worked for us. It should be easy onboarding for this person, right? If they're still available to pick up. So we'll see. I don't know. Like it is pretty crazy. Like everything's happening all at once. Like we had this real positive track. Everything was like moving in an upward trajectory, and then all of a sudden, the first big company, drops 10,000 people. Then all the rest are like, well, I'm not the first, so now I can drop 20 or 15 or what have you.
It's a domino effect from there. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, yeah, it just happens.
Yeah. So, but these people, like those companies are going to need some of these people back. I just can't see a time where they don't need to bring some of this talent back to themselves. Hopefully they're shortlisted. But there's smaller companies that are growing that could utilize this talent. Like now you're getting Fortune 500, or not just Fortune 500 companies, but you're getting top tier talent from these bigger companies. You can then take these people on and then do something with them, in the hopes that you also grow as a company. But I don't know. Again, optimism. Like we'll see. We'll see what 2023 looks like, because it kind of it has to come to a head hopefully this year, and that doesn't drag out to 2024 or 2025. At least that's the hope. I mean, like houses cost 90% more than they cost before. Gas is through the roof. Like this is the conversations old people have, right? We're having these now.
Yeah, it's different factors too, though, right? Like it's refineries and stuff like that when it comes to
Right.
gas, right? But and some of the stuff is political. We're not going to get into that, but some of the stuff
Right,
is political as well, right? So,
but yeah, it's just hard times for everybody. Like to be laid off and everything is going up in price. Doesn't the math ain't mathing, so to speak. So something has to come to a head. So hopefully they do get picked up. And then we talk about these millions of vacancies, right? Like maybe they're not millions, maybe they're hundreds of thousands, maybe they're tens of thousands, but still you have all this talent out there that can fill those gaps. So, and as we saw, like you can't do like with the Baltimore school system that we talked about on Monday, you can't do security through theater, right? It can't be theater. It can't be like, okay, we did the audits, we see what's wrong, and now we do nothing with it. Like if you do have this shortage and this gap that needs to be filled, if you never fill it, then you can't be mad when, like we talked about on Tuesday, a ransomware gang picks up some talent, it pays them at a very good price point, and then they take more money off of these legal companies. So like you should probably employ them before they find other employment. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I'm just saying like the options are out there. So so it's best for you to pick up talent and shore up your security, as opposed to the bad guys picking up talent and doing the opposite. But I don't know. I digress. Like hopefully the next time we jump into this conversation, it's like, oh, things pick back up. Exact opposite of the early 2023, like the end of 2023. It's like, oh man, all these coaches are picking up people. It's very diverse. Like it's crazy out here. Everybody's getting a job. But definitely tune in throughout the week. Again, Monday, Tuesday are topics, Wednesday's discussion. Friday, we talk about everything else. So definitely tune in for that one. We'll talk about some games, some TV shows and things. Hit up all of our websites that go by our name. You can hit me up personally. I'm at RyRy Security Guy. That's RYRY Security Guy. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Clubhouse. Stay safe, stay secure.